everyone and welcome to Smart World with CNBC. Bonjour à tous et bienvenue dans Smart World avec CNBC, votre émission 100% bilingue en anglais et en français. We are together to have an overview of the greatest business moments of CNBC. At the top of this program, une émission spéciale États-Unis, début du vote anticipé dans 4 États, l'impact de la saga TikTok US sur les élections. C'est parti, let's go, la course à la Maison-Blanche est lancée. Americans are no longer able to download TikTok or WeChat from the Apple and Google Play app stores. Depuis hier minuit, il est illégal pour Apple et Google de rendre les applications disponibles dans l'App Store. Let's see how the Commerce Department ban on WeChat and TikTok impacts both US users and Chinese users.
It's not really going to have as much of an impact as you might think because this Commerce Department decision only affects WeChat in the United States. So that's 19 million users. And then it doesn't touch the Chinese version called Emission, which is 1.2 billion users. And that's the part that the U.S. business community here had been most concerned about. What's also really, I think, a climb down for TikTok is that this decision only shuts upgrades and maintenance on Sunday. That's what the Commerce Secretary had said. But the real shutdown is on November 12th. So that allows ByteDance to have more time for a deal if there is, in fact, a deal, since this all happens, as you guys were talking about before, after the election. Now, one of the big concerns has been about political manipulation by Beijing. And just to give you an example of how this works on WeChat, we tried to send a photo of President Xi Jinping on WeChat, and this is what happens. This is the photo of President Xi. I tried sending it on WeChat on the phone on the right. You could see on the left, the message never appears. I tried sending back a sticker of Xi clapping, and it never makes it. So people here create workarounds to evade the censors. You can make a screenshot, flip the photo, or scribble on it to send it through. Just don't expect it to be there for very long. So as you guys can tell, it's very common knowledge that people have here that you don't talk about sensitive issues on WeChat. These days, no talk about the Muslim Uyghurs, especially when you're talking to the Chinese staff. Don't say anything in big group events, and I'm pausing here because we're being censored right now, but in big group chats, because you could get the leader of the group, the person who started the group, in trouble, potentially detained. And then you don't criticize leaders' names, especially Xi Jinping.
Pour l'instant, si vous vivez aux États-Unis et que vous avez déjà téléchargé TikTok sur votre téléphone, les nouvelles dispositions ne vous concernent pas immédiatement. Vous pouvez toujours enregistrer, ajouter et partager du contenu pendant au moins les 3 prochaines semaines avant le prochain ordre exécutif de Donald Trump. On en parle moins en France, mais l'application WeChat est-elle aussi sur un siège éjectable aux États-Unis? According to senior Trump administration official, the social messaging app owned by Chinese tech giant Tencent is dead in the United States, they say. Let's listen.
Yeah, John, that's right. I just spoke to a senior administration official to get a sense of the lay of the land of just where we are as of right now in the negotiations. And what the official is telling me in terms of Oracle and TikTok is that those negotiations are going to go through the weekend. They are ongoing. They're still trying to figure out a lot of major pieces, including the capital structure, who's going to own this combined entity, how the software is going to be worked out. So those are the big pieces of the deal. The official tells me, though, that there is still a chance that there is a deal for a transaction involving TikTok before this implementation of the new commerce rules goes into place on Monday, and users are no longer able to download TikTok off of American app stores. So a chance for a deal, says the senior administration official. The official also saying here that WeChat, however, is dead in the United States. So TikTok might have a chance in the United States. WeChat, according to the senior administration official, is dead in the United States based on this final action. There's no appetite in the U.S. government for anything to do in terms of saving WeChat. So A couple of other points. One is that the CFIUS committee, the Committee on Foreign Investment of the United States, according to this senior administration official, the formal committee has not even met yet. Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, is on the phone working out terms of a potential deal with all the players, but this has not been brought to the full committee, has not been brought to the president for a final decision, and the senior administration official says no final decisions have been made yet in terms of TikTok. And then finally, John, the important point here that the senior administration official makes is that the Chinese government has not weighed in on this potential deal, saying that the administration has not heard any signals from the Chinese government yet of whether they would bless on their end the sale of TikTok assets by ByteDance to Oracle for a U.S. subsidiary or an entirely new U.S. company. So until the Chinese government blesses this, there's at least a potential scenario in which the United States could come up with a deal between Oracle, TikTok, ByteDance for a transfer of assets. That deal could be blessed by the President of the United States, and it could still be blocked by the Chinese government, who says, we're not going to allow you to sell this stuff to the Americans. So a lot of moving parts there, but one point that I think maybe is getting lost a little bit in all the conversation about this is, where are the Chinese on this? The administration officials saying the U.S. government just doesn't know at this point. So a lot of moving parts behind the scenes right now, John. Back over to you.
Pour le moment, l'administration de Donald Trump ne semble pas intéressée par un deal WeChat. L'application est pourtant vitale pour que les Américains puissent communiquer avec leurs amis et leurs familles en Chine. Dans un communiqué publié vendredi, un porte-parole de la maison mère a déclaré que l'entreprise avait toujours intégré les normes les plus élevées de confidentialité des utilisateurs. Former NSA hacker talk about national security concerns related to TikTok. Qui mieux qu'un hacker de la NSA pour nous parler des failles du système TikTok? Let's hear more from NSA hacker David Kennedy.
Let's bring in David Kennedy, founder and CEO of cybersecurity firm Trusted Security and former hacker for the NSA and Marine Corps. Thanks so much for joining us, David. Interested that you described yourself as a former hacker, no less, rather than just a kind of data analyst, perhaps would have expected the description. Anyway, I digress. My first and key question is, were national security concerns legitimate in the first place as it relates to TikTok, and why?
We've seen China have a track record with Huawei, with intellectual property theft when we talk about a number of different data breaches. China's been the largest culprit for intellectual property theft for going on since the history of technology. And they really haven't curbed their appetite for that intellectual property theft. And so, when you look at the technological footprint that China has within the United States, there's definitely a large area of concern. The issue is that for TikTok specifically, there hasn't been anything released from the intelligence community or any evidence that has really showed the direct risk to U.S. consumers or users of that product that would be potentially alarming or harmful. It just depends on us taking the word for the U.S. government on, hey, it is harmful, China's trying to spy on us and all those different things. We haven't seen any evidence of that as of yet.
What would stop them from already gathering all the facial recognition data, whatever might be at risk of the 100 million plus U.S. users that they already have on file? And even if you did get a full sale, surely they could still exploit the data they already have collected.
That's absolutely right. And I think that's a lot of the concern right now is that they're using this information around facial recognition technology, pairing that with your phone so that they have your actual phone data, i.e. your phone number, your potentially locations, things of that effect, as well as the code that actually goes onto your device itself. If they can triangulate and focus in on, key targets or people in positions, can they send code directly to the phone itself to eavesdrop on those? So there's a lot of security concerns around what China's capabilities are when it comes to this, not necessarily that they've done it before, but you're absolutely right in the fact that if this becomes a U.S.-based company, U.S.-based servers, things to that effect, they already have a lot of that data. And I think that's a lot of the large concern right now is that a lot of the influence from these types of companies, when it comes from a Chinese technology companies here in the United States, the potential stronghold that they have on harvesting that data and using that data for malicious purposes.
Selon le hacker de la NSA, David Kennedy, il n'y a pas de preuves légitimes concernant les risques liés à l'application TikTok. Étant donné que les données des utilisateurs sont hébergées sur des serveurs en Chine par la société mère, des inquiétudes ont surgi. Cependant, David Kennedy affirme qu'à l'heure actuelle, il n'y a aucune preuve montrant que le gouvernement chinois ait eu accès à ces données ou les ait utilisées. So what deal would convince Trump to scrap TikTok ban? Donald Trump a donné samedi son feu vert à un projet impliquant Oracle et Walmart. A new plan involving Oracle as a technology partner in the United States and Walmart as a business partner. Let's see what we can expect with CNBC.
Yeah, Jim, just listening to you and Andrew a moment ago, doesn't sound like you see a whole lot of material to salvage this in the next 48 hours.
Well, I think that Walmart feels like it's given everything it can. I think that the people in the private equity have given everything. Oracle, difficult to tell whether they think they can do more, but they had really felt that when pre-Trump, that it was looking like it was 43% owned by U.S., 14% by international. Chinese owned 45. Post-Trump, they're talking about, look, U.S. owns 53, international owns 11, Chinese own 36. I think it's the Chinese owning 36 is the sticking point. David, what level do you think the president would allow this deal, or would it just be as long as there's Chinese, forget it?
I'm not sure, Jim. I think that's one of the key questions, and we don't know the answer. Listen, I stick with my reporting from yesterday, though, and I don't think there's anything in today's news from Commerce that indicates that it's not possible Trump will sign off on this transaction, right? I mean, it's still very possible he will come to the rescue.
Absolutely.
In fact, that is sort of the dramatic denouement that he likes, isn't it?
Exactly. We just need Walmart to say, you know what, Mr. President, you win. We'll do it, whatever that is.
Yeah, I mean,
and
but
then
I think
then they get it.
But Jim, they've got the deal on the table that they've offered. I think CFIUS, again, in my reporting here, is that they've more or less signed off on it, but that it needs the approval of the president, which is typical, at least when it comes to that. Now, by the way, what is completely atypical is the way that the U.S. government has gone about structuring a transaction. You know, if people wanted to take issue with that in the courts, they probably could. But separately, as to whether or not you get a deal, as we said yesterday, it could be within 24 to 36 hours that the president makes this decision. Jim, I don't see anything that necessarily indicates that's still not going to potentially be the case. You have to get this ready and tell people, I would assume, to be ready for TikTok app downloads not being allowed.
Yes.
And by the way, the WeChat stuff is actually more serious in many ways and is part of a company that is a $650 billion behemoth in China. And a lot of that stuff takes place as of the 20th in terms of WeChat.
That's a tough one because I regard that one as a much more difficult security risk if I were in the White House. David, they wanted to trumpet, and this is the let's call them the TikTok side. They wanted to trumpet that they have 25,000 new American jobs. I mean, you could see the president saying, you know what? You wanted 25, we want 35. They want all data and U.S. information stays in America. The president could say, I want you to have no contact with the Chinese. And you know what? There's a deal. Because what they could say is it's going to take us a little time, but we'll get there.
Right. Well, originally,
the big IPO.
Right.
The IPO was say
you've been talking about this, the idea that there would be an IPO. That essentially what you seem to be saying, Jim, is that ByteDance would sell out of its position over time.
Yes. In
the public markets, taking TikTok US, or maybe it's TikTok UK also, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. It's unclear whether they're all included or not. The Five Eyes, they call them. Taking that public and ByteDance no longer being a part of it. Meanwhile, I still don't know what the 20% that I've reported Oracle is willing to buy, what that's 20% of, how they're valuing this TikTok property. But to your point, that makes sense. I would remind people as well, the U.S. government was willing, at least at one point, to give Microsoft, for example, a year with the source code being updated from China before they had to take it over in full and make sure it had no Chinese influence or no Chinese engineers associated with it.
Donald Trump doit à nouveau passer en revue ce nouveau deal. L'accord permettrait de garder la version US de TikTok. 53% des parts au total seraient attribuées à des entreprises et investisseurs américains et 36% à des investisseurs chinois. Early voting has started and most states seem to be ready for mail-in ballots. Le vote anticipé pour la présidentielle du 3 novembre prochain a démarré. Les électeurs du Minnesota, du Dakota du Sud, du Wyoming et de la Virginie ont parfois même dû attendre plusieurs heures avant d'atteindre l'isoloir. Certains préfèrent donc le scrutin postal, surtout en temps de pandémie. Décryptage de CNBC.
In this time of a pandemic, we have people who are in front of their screens and they're getting a lot of sort of enjoyment from the screens. They're working there, they're getting their news there, and the misinformation campaigns are basically exploding and promoting sort of misinformation around mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, and how the whole process works. It's really important that people check vetted, trusted sources around the rules for their state.
That being said, do you think enough checks and balances have been put in place for the smooth running of the system into elections?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be some type of election irregularity, but a lot of work has been done since the 2016 presidential election and the 2018 midterm. The states are ready. It doesn't mean there's not going to be issues here and there, but the states are ready and they have good auditing places, checks and balances in place.
But even so, you know, as I go through your notes, there seems to be a sense that the whole voting mechanism, the whole counting mechanism is still at risk for either cyber attacks or a cyber break-in. And I just want to understand what has been done to ring fence that issue.
Yeah, you bring up a really wonderful point, because the amount of people who will choose to do absentee and mail-in ballot voting is going to be a lot higher this year due to the pandemic. In some cases, states will have processes that have never seen a volume this high of absentee ballots. Some states are not allowed to even start counting and qualifying these ballots until election night. So what you could have is you could ostensibly have a number of votes being counted in person on election night, saying that one candidate has more votes than the other, and still have days and weeks to count the mail-in and absentee ballots.
Teresa Payton, ancienne directrice de l'information de la Maison-Blanche, affirme que la plupart des États sont prêts à mettre en place des processus d'audit appropriés. Les États s'efforcent de garantir que les cachets postaux soient sécurisés. Ils cherchent surtout à éviter les poursuites judiciaires et autres problèmes liés à des marquages peu clairs qui ont gêné d'ailleurs le décompte des bulletins de vote lors des primaires. Et la course au vaccin est également un enjeu crucial de ces élections américaines. And ahead of the elections, Donald Trump keeps mentioning a potential vaccine. President Donald Trump is escalating his promise for a coronavirus vaccine before Election Day.
As part of Operation Warp Speed, my administration's manufacturing all of the most promising vaccines in advance. And actually, it'll be fairly long in advance. As soon as a vaccine is approved, the administration will deliver it to the American people immediately. Distribution will begin within 24 hours after notice. And the general, I think those are the words specifically you wanted us to use.
Yes,
within 24 hours, you're all set to go, and massive amounts will be delivered through our great military. And the general is one of our best, and he is ready to go. We'll have manufactured at least 100 million vaccine doses before the end of the year, and likely much more than that. Hundreds of millions of doses will be available every month, and we expect to have enough vaccines for every American by April. And again, I'll say that even at that later stage, the delivery will go as fast as it comes. They can deliver. They're very good. Best, I think, probably the best in the world. The estimates I'm providing today are based on the manufacturing that's in process, and that's in process immediately right now. We've already exceeded our ambitious goals under the Defense Production Act contracts that we've secured. We may even get far above these numbers. The numbers that I'm telling you today, I think we'll exceed them very, very substantially. And I think that also includes distribution. I think distribution will go even quicker than most people think. I'm relying on our military. Everything I've done with our military has worked out very well. In a short time, we'll have a safe and effective vaccine, and we'll defeat the virus. Interestingly, as I was saying, that go very well, just like what we did with our military with respect to ISIS went very well, long ahead of schedule. They have been incredible in working with me.
Le président Donald Trump affirme que les États-Unis fabriqueraient suffisamment de doses de vaccins contre le coronavirus pour chaque Américain d'ici avril. Il déclare que les États-Unis disposeraient d'au moins 100 millions de doses de vaccins avant la fin de l'année et probablement beaucoup plus, dit-il. Mais à travers l'Amérique, les démocrates, les indépendants et même certains républicains ne font pas confiance à Donald Trump sur ce sujet. They do not trust the current administration to produce a safe and effective vaccine on such an aggressive timeline. Former Special Assistant to President Barack Obama, Grant Harris, expresses his concern about the politicization of the coronavirus vaccine. Let's listen to his interview on CNBC.
While every country needs a vaccine, not every country has a major election in under 50 days, and the United States does. And that means that there's room for manipulation, there's room for spin and messaging that could have real political intention rather than being based on the science. There certainly is a lot of need in the United States for individuals to get back to work. I'm one of many trying to balance homeschooling with kids and the like. And those are high-class problems compared to many around the world. But I think the problem is that there is a deficit in trust in this administration and in the discourse generally. And so whether there is discussion of a vaccine in that time frame or whether it's masks or what the CDC is saying and what Trump is contradicting, all of this is now being seen through the lens of the upcoming election.
Well, let's talk about the upcoming election. How close do you think it will be? We know that Mr. Biden has about a 7-point lead, but that is declining the closer we get towards November. How close do you think it'll be?
Right now, it's very tough to see. We saw this 4 years ago as well when the polls ended up narrowing, but then even with Hillary Clinton's lead, the Electoral College went to Donald Trump, though she won the popular vote. I think that what we're going to really need to pay attention to, of course, are the battleground states. These national polls are informative, but the Electoral College in the United States and with its idiosyncrasies means that an election can be decided by a razor-thin margin as it was in the past. So it's too early to call.
Do you fear that we may see a contested election this time around?
I do fear that. And we're in uncharted waters here in the United States where the president is taking steps and saying things that are meant almost to invalidate the results preemptively. He's encouraging his supporters to vote twice, multiple times, which is against the law. He's calling into question the fraud that he sees that is related to mailing in ballots, even though he mails in his own ballot. And this is something where we have not had a president, a leader in this country, set the stage like this. And so I'm deeply concerned that if that is the tone that is being set, that there will be a lack of trust in the outcome.
Donald Trump a mis en lumière à plusieurs reprises l'arrivée imminente d'un vaccin contre le coronavirus et l'a explicitement lié au calendrier électoral. L'espoir pour Trump et la peur pour les démocrates est que la promesse d'un vaccin imminent éloignera les électeurs des autres sujets clés de ces élections. Differences between Western countries and Eastern countries in responding to the coronavirus pandemic have emerged. Adrian Woodridge, éditorialiste et journaliste politique à The Economist, explique comment la pandémie a mis en évidence les faiblesses des gouvernements occidentaux.
Joining us now is Adrian Wooldridge. She's the political editor and columnist at The Economist and author of 7 books. His latest book is titled The Wake-Up Call, Why the Pandemic Has Exposed the Weakness of the West and How to Fix It. Adrian, very good afternoon to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Maybe we'll get specifically to the TikTok drama in just a moment, but the main idea in your book is that the pandemic itself has highlighted a trend more clearly that was already happening in your mind, which is that we might be drawing nearer to the end of leadership by the West and that China's really catching up.
Absolutely. What the pandemic really was an examination which the whole world took at the same time. And the winners and losers in this examination were rather surprising. We found Western countries, particularly the United States and Great Britain, doing much worse than we expected, and countries in East Asia doing much better than we expected, and particularly notably China. China unleashed this virus on the world, but it got it under control. And now we see very substantial, very significant differences in death rates between East Asia and the West. I think we were talking, your news item earlier was talking about New York. I think New York's had 20,000 people who have died of COVID. Seoul, which is actually a slightly bigger city than New York, has had about 50 people die of COVID. China now has, Beijing at least, is back really to normal. They're wearing face masks, but essentially everything else is normal. London now is closed down, not entirely closed down, but Westminster, Whitehall, the centre of London, is almost a ghost town. So we are suffering worse. And that, I think, is because, Eastern governments have done a better job of bringing this thing under control than Western governments, particularly the United States government and the British government.
Is this a democracy versus autocracy factor?
I don't think so, really. If you look at the countries that have done well, they include some autocracies, which is China, but also some liberal countries. South Korea is a country which has a very vibrant culture. You have Parasite that won the Oscar. You have very big, raucous nightclubs. You have, a culture of individualism there. So I don't think that is the thing. I think the thing that really differentiates countries that have succeeded from those that have failed is government capacity, state capacity. Countries that have really invested in and value the ability of their governments to deliver public services have done better. Those that have neglected that thing have done worse. And I'm afraid the United States and Great Britain seem to be very high on the list of countries which have rather dysfunctional governments at the moment.
La carte des cas de coronavirus à travers l'Europe montre une chose claire. Les nations les plus riches d'Europe occidentale ont plus souffert du virus que les pays de la moitié orientale de l'UE. De nombreuses causes sont évoquées par Adrian Wooldridge, une espérance de vie plus faible, une densité de population plus faible, moins de vols vers la Chine, mais aussi et surtout la mise en œuvre d'un confinement dès l'apparition des cas. Thank you all for being with us. Merci à tous d'avoir participé à ce format 100% hybride. See you very soon for the rest of international news.